And then the wonderful Helen is going to read for us this evening. The same as the normal Helen.
Bible reading today is from Mark 10, verse 46 to the end of Mark 10. Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. They came to Jericho, and as Jesus was leaving with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, take pity on me." Many of the people scolded him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted even more loudly, "Son of David, take pity on me." Jesus stood and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Get up, he's calling you." He threw off his cloak, jumped up and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. "Teacher," the blind man answered, "I want to see again." "Go," Jesus told him, "your faith has made you well." And at once he was able to see and followed Jesus on the road.
Thank you, Helen. Let's pray. Holy One, guide us this evening as we explore the journey that Bartimaeus was on in their life and how it reflects for us today in our lives. Amen. Isn't that really weird? I was just thinking it could be really, really handy if I had a Bible right now, just in case I need to look at it, wouldn't it? And then I've come out and there it is. It's just there, already open on the right thing. Thanks, Andy. Great. So if I need to drop out halfway through, I'll just get Mickey to just carry on. So this is a really interesting story because it's one of not many stories in the Bible that features in 3 Gospels all at the same time. So we know that this interaction definitely happened because it's so widely written about. And the time when this interaction happens is when Jesus is just about to go towards Jerusalem on that very final journey, effectively. So it's like very much towards the end of Jesus' ministry. In fact, it's quite a weird time to be talking about it because it's not Easter, we're not leading up to Easter, but that's the time when this interaction was happening. But actually, with Bartimaeus, there's so much to explore because Bartimaeus was absolutely stigmatized. Bartimaeus was blind, and so if you think about that, as with lots of people with disabilities at that time, and also to a point now, massively stigmatized in society. The society at that time was one that was very much based on hard work, labour, what you could bring to a family, what you would be able to offer, what your trade as a family would be. And if you were blind or if you had a disability, that meant that you weren't able to live up to whatever that trade was. You were basically seen as a failure in society, and you were seen as lowest of the low, not someone who counted. The people who counted were those who contributed towards society. And so Bartimaeus, I keep calling him Bartholomew, I'm really sorry, Bartimaeus, their status in society was already really low. But does anyone notice where this happened? It's right at the start, verse 46. They came to Jericho. Now Jericho was 400 metres below sea level and was the place known in the world as being the lowest point in the earth. So there's a little bit of symbolism here as well, that Jericho, the lowest in society, was also in a place that was associated with being the lowest of the low. Not only that, but this interaction doesn't even happen in Jericho. It happens outside Jericho, as Jesus is, and we're not sure whether he was coming or going. It says here that he was, as he was coming, but then in the other Gospels it says as they're leaving. Doesn't matter. What we know is that it's happening on the fringes. It's happening right on the fringes of that town. Because ultimately, once you're in that town wall, once you're into that town, there is no way on earth that someone who's begging would ever get a word in edgeways. And so the only place that somebody such as Bartimaeus would ever be able to do any begging or have a voice heard would be by approaching travellers as they were coming into the town for the first time ever. People who didn't know who he was, didn't know his reputation, didn't know anything about him. So there's a little bit of context. The bit that I find really interesting about the interaction with Jesus is what Jesus asks Bartimaeus. He doesn't say, "Would you like your sight back?" He doesn't say, "Do you want to not be blind anymore? Do you want to see?" Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" Completely unassuming. Not in any way, shape or form telling Bartimaeus what he thinks the solution is. But letting Bartimaeus come to Jesus, saying what it is that he wants. Could that be the same for us? Could that be the same for us in the modern world? Where people see people on the fringes, people oppressed, and make assumptions that they know what it is that those people need to not be oppressed anymore. And rather than ask them, what is it that you need, they assume that they know what that person needs. So they assume that a homeless person needs money for food, or needs food, when actually it could be that they're desperate for a bit of warmth, or a cigarette, or whatever it is that might be going through their mind at that moment in time. But what we do instead is we assume. We assume that we know what it is. We assume that we know best, because we're not in that situation. We're not that homeless person. They are. So we know what it is that they need to be more like us. That's not what Jesus is doing here. And this whole interaction is about Bartimaeus being brave, being proud, and not letting those around him silence him. Because all of those around him, and we've talked about this a little bit with Zachariah, was it the other week? Zacchaeus, I'm rubbish at these names, aren't I? Bartimaeus is not seen as someone who Jesus should be speaking to, not worthy of Jesus. And so people are trying to silence Bartimaeus. People are trying to get Bartimaeus out of the way, because there are people more worthy of Jesus that Jesus needs to spend time with than Bartimaeus, the blind beggar, who lives on the fringes of the lowest town of the low. But Jesus hears anyway, doesn't he? Jesus hears, stops, and said, "Call him." And interestingly, this person who was the lowest of the low in the lowest town of the low, living on the fringes, makes himself a name in the and healed him. So suddenly, because of Jesus' action, the healing, because let's imagine Bartimaeus hadn't been healed right now, would that have made it into the gospel? Possibly not, because that would have just been another interaction of one of hundreds of thousands. But because Jesus did heal Bartimaeus, suddenly those gospel writers, the scripture writers, were like, oh, this is really, we can talk about Bartimaeus, not because of Bartimaeus, but because of Jesus. But that's not what Jesus wanted. Jesus wanted this person's voice to be heard. The person on the fringes, the lowest of the low, in the lowest town of the low, wanted that voice heard. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for us as queer, affirming allies? What does that message mean for us around Jesus? Others might want to silence us and say that we're not worthy of Jesus, that we aren't good enough, that our voice shouldn't be heard. Is Jesus saying, call them? What do you need from me? We'll have a little discussion. I've got a few questions to go through. Oh, there was a picture of Zacchaeus. Bartimaeus, not Zacchaeus. It was doing so well. There we are. An awful picture, but yeah, it was the only one I could find. I wanted to do like a Ruth, because we haven't got Ruth at the moment, and Ruth loves putting like art up, don't they? And I was like, oh, I'd love to put some art up. But one thing Ruth's very good at is citing who the artist is. And I found a few really nice artistic references of Bartimaeus, but I couldn't find who the artists were, so I failed. I'm sorry. Right, so here's our questions. There's 4 of them, but hopefully they'll get you talking and thinking about this story. So the first one, has there been a time where you have felt empowered to speak up, even when others have tried to quieten you? Jesus asked Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? What does that mean for us as LGBTQIA+ community? Have we ever been like those in the crowd, trying to silence or ignore the voices that make us uncomfortable? And how can this message shape our interactions with people in our community who may feel marginalised? Again, online people, sorry, 2 weeks in a row we've not had the best of tech. Really, really sorry. We will try and do something about it. I don't know what, because I keep trying to fix it. But yeah, we'll work on it. But bless you, and see you very soon. And for those in the room, I think we'll break up into 2 groups. Yeah, we'll break into 2 groups. So if maybe 6 or 7